right along those same lines, quality of meat. Do you have to have grass-fed, grass-finished, organic, pastured, whatever, everything? Does everything have to be the highest quality?
Never. And honestly, I think that the grass finished meat, like most of the time, I can't really even stomach it. The taste is grassy. It's just not my favorite.
Agreed.
I've turned down any company who wants to send me meat that's like all grass finished. I usually say no, or I say, you can send it, but I'm not promising you that I can't post about it if it tastes this way. And so those things are very specific for me. I've never eaten organs. And I think we've done some very full episodes on this, but like I have cousins who raise cattle and they live in a very remote part of West Virginia. They can't sell their beef to local people in their area because there aren't local people in their area. And they all raise cows. Like they live in this very remote part. I live in Phoenix. There's not enough local farmers to feed all of Phoenix. When I'm shopping at Costco and when I'm shopping at the regular grocery store, I am supporting local farmers throughout the US. They're just not local to me. I am still getting really good quality meat. I think this vegan message of the factory farms and all of this craziness actually seeps over into our world where we are still being propagandized by some of that messaging. The fact that like cows are eating Skittles and pumped full of hormones for no reason, like none of this is true. And the meat that you can get from a regular grocery store is absolute quality. I buy pork from the regular grocery store and I get a lot of criticism for that because of PUFAs and some of the purists in the community who talk about how regular chicken and regular pork are what is making us fat. No, pizza and Twinkies made me fat. Pints of ice cream every day made me fat. Eating regular pork and chicken from the grocery store is not my issue. And I think that's another one of those things where the cost gets too out of control and astronomical for people. The flavor is terrible. And the accessibility isn't there, that people put so much pressure on themselves. I would be somebody who would just go back to eating spaghetti because that seems like a way more realistic option when now I'm doing amazing. And I think sometimes the message of eat what you can afford, eat what you like and eat what you can afford, I appreciate. But I also think that that message is giving the concession that it's not as good quality. And that's where I disagree. The meat from the regular grocery store is amazing quality. Walmart Angus beef steaks are some of the best steaks that you can get. And I love them. And the quality is great. And the fat content and all of those things are amazing. And the flavor is great. That I think it's not about because I can afford it. It's also because it's amazing quality. And I think that we need to feel confident in that decision as well.
That's such a great point. I love the way you talked about thinking about local, not necessarily I got this next door, but local. It's our country. It's,
yes,
from the United States. It's like maybe not, every, cow producer is producing meat all the time. So that has to change and prices vary and things like that. But I agree. Places like Costco and the local store has great quality meat, like some of the best I've ever had. And I love the idea of shopping local at a ranch. And the same way for me, like I can't stomach it. I cooked it every way that I know how, marinated and smoked and, in roast and everything. I can't get it to taste good to the point that I would eat it. But anything I get at the store, I can get tri-tip for a few bucks a pound and it tastes amazing and great. I'm going to do that.
And I think, unfortunately, people give up. They message me desperate, like, I can't stomach, how do you make grass-finished meat taste good? I'm like, don't eat it. Or how do you afford eating all this organic? Don't eat it. Eat some regular eggs and eat some beef. And like, trust me, it tastes way better. I think there's, the myths have been busted about the yellow egg yolks. It's like you feed some chickens a bunch of marigold and all of a sudden these deep color egg yolks are there. Like the nutritional differences are so minor that you can make up that difference. Like eat some fish and you're going to fix your omega-3, omega-6 situation. And you don't have to worry about like eating regular pork and that type of thing.
Yeah, don't get too worked up about some of those minor details and the reality of the situation is if you're eating this way, you're probably going to be just fine. Your body can probably regulate just fine.
Yeah.
You mentioned something, this is a huge, it seems like it's even like controversial at this point in the community and its organs. What is your feeling about organ meats? I know you said you don't eat them and maybe, I know this is Judy's, baby basically, but maybe we can comment on behalf of her of the things that she's learned about organ meats over time.
Yeah. So, I didn't eat them at first because that sounds terrible. Like that sounds awful. Like, I don't want anything to do with that. And that's honestly, I just didn't eat them for that reason. And I wasn't experiencing any health gaps. And so I didn't do that. And then, through learning from Judy about the vitamin A toxicity and the overconsumption, I think we go through these cycles in the community where everybody was eating tons and tons of liver. And again, if your body is somebody who is metabolically healthy and you can tolerate a little bit of liver, then, and you think that's good, great. But like, I know too many people that are choking it down. And, because they think it's this healthy superfood. I think in my mind, right, Judy's the one who does the science stuff, but let's think about it realistically. If you're killing this giant animal and you're killing a mammoth, or you're killing any kind of zebra, there's one liver versus how many hundreds of pounds of meat. And I think that like, it doesn't make sense if you want to talk about ancestrally, it doesn't make sense from that perspective that you would need like ounces and ounces of liver every day, because that wouldn't have been accessible to people, and they're eating the majority of muscle meats. I think that's part of it. I think, you can really dig into a lot of Judy's content on vitamin A toxicity. If you see the people in the community who were eating tons and tons of liver and still eat lots of liver, you've noticed that they now incorporate a lot of fruit. And I think that's because they likely started feeling better incorporating all this fruit, because they were getting too much vitamin A from all of the liver and a lot of the organs that they were eating in the first place. So I think that's something that I've observed from an outside perspective, but I had no intention of eating it in the first place. And then once Judy said, or like I learned more and she presented the research and the science behind it, I was like feeling a little more vindicated about not having it in the first place. But it's definitely not something that was ever interesting to me. And I'm never going to just force myself to eat something that I don't like in order to stay healthy. I wish I had that mindset. I wish health was my number one goal overall. I wish I could say food is fuel and I just eat it to be healthy, but I'm not that person, and I will never be that person.
Yeah, no, totally. It's so confusing with the people that I work with when I coach them on the carnivore diet, when they follow a certain somebody who's been in the world for a long time, and we probably don't need to drop names, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. And, they're eating nose to tail and promoting nose to tail, and everything has to be nose to tail, and tons of organs and organ supplements was such a big thing. And now they have completely like switched their message and including all these foods that they weren't including before. And it just for the standard listener, they get really confused. Like the messaging becomes really tough. And so I really love that approach. It's like you weren't eating organs when you were eating a really terrible diet anyway. Why would you kind of mix them in now when you're eating, things like eggs? Whole eggs probably has all of the same nutrients that you would need without the risk of that kind of toxicity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is where context and nuance matters so much, where people sharing the message or sharing a lot of the fruit stuff, obviously how their health is and their context matters. But like, I also know for myself, I can't moderate those things, but I definitely am the average overweight person who it needs this to be enjoyable in order to lose weight. And so while sometimes that context is there from people sharing about fruits and organ meats and things, I think sometimes it's buried when it's more just like what I eat in a day. And I do think it causes a lot of confusion, even though there's like a little asterisk somewhere that says like, don't eat fruit if you're not metabolically healthy. Well, what's the average person who's scrolling through Instagram going to see is, wow, this guy's, an expert in this field and he's eating lots of meat and tons of fruit. Like I can do all those things too. And I get more messages than it breaks my heart about the number of people who kind of just go off the rails with that, when the average overweight person who's looking to improve their health can't handle those types of things.
That's right. And when that person decides they can eat fruit, they're going to eat, not necessarily something that grew in their backyard. They're going to eat tons of bananas that were shipped who knows from where. And all this fruit that's been bred to have tons of sugar, and that's out of context. Or they'll drink fruit juice, which is even like worse. Yes. Yeah, people get really confused about that. I really love what you said about the proportionality of the organ meats to the rest of the animal. And it was a few weeks after you and Judy appeared on the Carnivore Cast podcast that our mutual friend, who we absolutely love, Scott, hosted Dr. Bill Schindler, who we've had on the show a few times. He made the exact same point. If you just look at an animal, that tells you how much organ meats you should be consuming. Right. That's if we killed an animal and we ate it, you might get a bite or two. And that's kind of about it if you're sharing it around with everybody else in the community. And everything else you get is going to be meat. And you can think about that the same way. And I thought that was a really, really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense to me. When I heard it, it like clicked. I'm like, okay, well, this is again another reason why things would. I don't have to feel like I need to eat those things because I probably wouldn't have anyway. Let's be honest.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm glad we feel vindicated. I mean, I was chopping up liver and like freezing it and trying to take these little cubes, and I never noticed a difference on how I felt when I was doing
Right.
it or not. So yeah, glad that kind of clears the air there.